What if I told you that every negative thought spiraling through your mind right now is actually a choice? Not a fact, not reality, just a choice you're making without even realizing it. We live in a world where our minds have become prisons, where we're trapped by our own thinking patterns, convinced that anxiety is normal, that worry is productive, that mental chaos is just part of being human. But here's the brutal truth most people will never accept. Your negative thinking isn't happening to you. It's happening because of you. And the ancient Stoics figured this out over 2,000 years ago, long before modern psychology, before self-help gurus, before anyone even understood how the brain actually works. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the Roman Empire, wrote in his personal journal, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." Think about that for a moment. The Emperor of Rome, dealing with plagues, wars, and constant political pressure, understood something that most of us still haven't grasped. The battlefield isn't out there. It's in here, between your ears. Today we're diving deep into 7 brutal Stoic laws that will completely rewire how your mind processes negativity. Not gentle suggestions, not feel-good affirmations, but harsh truths that will force you to confront the real source of your mental suffering. Each law is drawn from ancient wisdom that's been battle-tested through centuries of human struggle, and I promise you, if you truly understand and apply these principles, your relationship with negative thinking will never be the same. Before we begin, I need you to do something right now. If you're serious about transforming your mind, don't treat this like background noise. Like this video immediately, drop a comment when something hits hard, and most importantly, don't skip ahead. Each law builds on the previous one, and missing even one piece could cost you the mental breakthrough you've been searching for. Let's start with the first brutal law that will shake the foundation of how you see your own thoughts. Law number 1. You are not your thoughts. You are the observer of your thoughts. This might sound simple, but it's the most revolutionary concept you'll ever encounter. Right now, as you're listening to this, thoughts are flowing through your mind. Maybe you're thinking about what you have to do later. Maybe you're judging what I'm saying. Maybe you're already planning to skip to the next point. But here's the question that changes everything. Who is the one noticing these thoughts? Epictetus, who went from slave to one of history's greatest philosophers, understood this distinction better than anyone. He said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But most people miss the deeper meaning. You don't just have power over your mind's reactions to outside events. You have power over your relationship with your own thoughts. Think of your mind like a river. Your thoughts are the water flowing through it, constantly moving, constantly changing. But you are not the water. You are the riverbank, watching it all flow by. You can observe the water without being swept away by it. You can notice when it's turbulent without drowning in it. You can see when it's calm without clinging to that calmness. Most people spend their entire lives being tossed around by the river of their thoughts, never realizing they have the option to step onto the bank and simply watch. When a negative thought appears, they immediately become that thought. "I'm worthless" becomes their identity. "I can't handle this" becomes their reality. "Nothing ever works out for me" becomes their truth. But the Stoic realizes something profound. Thoughts are just mental events, no different from sounds you hear or sensations you feel. A thought that says, "I'm a failure," has no more inherent truth than a car honking outside your window. Both are just phenomena occurring in your awareness. Here's how you start practicing this immediately. The next time a negative thought enters your mind, instead of fighting it or believing it, simply notice it. Say to yourself, I'm having the thought that I'm not good enough, or I'm noticing anxiety arising, or there's a story playing about how everything is going wrong. This simple shift in language creates distance between you and the thought. You're no longer the thought, you're the one observing the thought. And from that position of observation, you have choice. You can engage with the thought, examine it, or simply let it pass by like a cloud in the sky. The Stoics practiced this daily because they understood that the moment you identify with your thoughts, you become their prisoner. But the moment you recognize yourself as the observer, you become free. Law number 2. Negative emotions are not punishments. They are information. We've been conditioned to see negative emotions as problems to solve, feelings to avoid, or signs that something is fundamentally wrong with us. But the Stoics had a radically different perspective. They saw negative emotions as teachers, as messengers carrying important information about our inner world. Seneca wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Your negative emotions aren't trying to destroy you. They're trying to show you what needs to end so something better can begin. When you feel angry, that anger is information. It's telling you that one of your values has been violated, that a boundary has been crossed, or that you're trying to control something outside your influence. When you feel anxious, that anxiety is information. It's showing you where you're focused on future outcomes you can't control, or where you're not living in alignment with your deeper values. When you feel depressed, that depression is information. It's often pointing to a gap between how you're living and how you know you should be living. It's your inner wisdom saying, this path isn't working. This version of yourself isn't authentic. Something needs to change. But here's where most people get it wrong. They try to eliminate the emotion instead of listening to its message. It's like having a smoke alarm going off, and instead of looking for the fire, you just remove the batteries. The alarm isn't the problem, it's the warning system trying to protect you. The Stoic approach is completely different. When Marcus Aurelius felt frustrated with the people around him, he didn't try to suppress that frustration. He examined it. He wrote in his journal, asking himself what this feeling was trying to teach him about his expectations, his attachments, his desire for control. Here's a practical way to apply this. The next time you experience a strong negative emotion, instead of immediately trying to make it go away, get curious about it. Ask yourself these questions. What is this emotion trying to tell me? What value of mine is being challenged? What am I trying to control that's outside my influence? What change is this feeling calling me to make? Sometimes the answer will be that you need to adjust your expectations. Sometimes it will be that you need to take action in a specific area of your life. Sometimes it will be that you need to let go of something you've been holding on to too tightly. But you'll never discover these insights if you're constantly at war with your own emotional experience. The Stoics understood that wisdom comes not from avoiding difficult feelings, but from learning to work with them skillfully. Law number 3. Your suffering is optional. Your pain is not. This is perhaps the most misunderstood principle in all of Stoic philosophy. People hear this and think it means you should never feel pain, that if you're truly wise, you'll be immune to all forms of suffering. That's not what the Stoics taught, and it's not what this law means. Pain is inevitable. Life will bring you loss, disappointment, physical discomfort, and emotional challenges. The Stoics never denied this reality. Marcus Aurelius dealt with chronic illness. Epictetus was physically disabled and had been enslaved. Seneca faced exile and eventually execution. They knew pain intimately. But suffering, that's different. Suffering is what happens when we resist the pain, when we create stories about why the pain shouldn't be happening, when we add layers of mental anguish on top of the actual experience. Here's how it works. Let's say you lose your job. The initial disappointment, the worry about finances, the uncertainty about the future, that's pain. It's natural, it's human, and it's unavoidable. But then your mind starts creating suffering on top of that pain. I'm such a failure. I'll never find anything as good as this. Everyone will think less of me. My life is ruined. That additional layer, that mental story you're telling yourself about what the job loss means about you, about your future, about your worth as a person, that's suffering. And that part is optional. The Stoic doesn't try to eliminate pain, because that's impossible and inhuman. Instead, they focus on not adding unnecessary suffering to the pain that already exists. They feel the disappointment without the story that they're worthless. They experience the uncertainty without the narrative that everything is doomed. They face the challenge without the mental drama about how unfair life is. Seneca put it perfectly when he said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Most of our suffering isn't caused by what's actually happening to us right now. It's caused by our thoughts about what happened in the past or what might happen in the future. It's caused by our resistance to reality, our demand that life should be different than it is. Here's how you start separating pain from suffering in your own life. When something difficult happens, notice the difference between the actual experience and your thoughts about the experience. Notice the difference between "I feel sad" and "I shouldn't feel sad." Notice the difference between "this is challenging" and "this is proof that nothing ever works out for me." The pain of the actual situation is enough. You don't need to multiply it with stories, interpretations, and resistance. The Stoics learned to sit with pain without adding the extra layer of suffering, and that made them incredibly resilient in the face of life's inevitable challenges. When you master this distinction, something remarkable happens. You realize that most of what you thought was unbearable was actually just the stories you were telling yourself about bearable situations. The pain was manageable. It was the suffering you created around the pain that felt overwhelming. This doesn't make you cold or unfeeling. It makes you clear. It allows you to respond to life's difficulties with wisdom instead of reaction, with strength instead of victimhood, with presence instead of mental chaos. Law number 4. Your perspective is your reality, and you control your perspective. Right now, everything you believe about your life, your circumstances, your future, it's all filtered through the lens of your perspective. And here's what most people never realize. That lens is completely under your control. The Stoics understood something that modern psychology is just beginning to catch up with. Reality isn't what happens to you. Reality is how you interpret what happens to you. Two people can experience the exact same event and on their perspective. Marcus Aurelius demonstrated this principled walk away with completely different realities based solely when he wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." Think about the power is not due to the thing itself, but to your change, your entire reality, simply by shifting how in that statement. At any moment you view it. But here's where it gets brutal. If you're constantly miserable, constantly stressed, constantly feeling like life is against you, you have to accept responsibility for the perspective that's creating that experience. You can't blame your circumstances anymore. You can't point to external events and say they're forcing you to feel a certain way. Your perspective is your choice, which means your emotional experience is your choice. This isn't about positive thinking or pretending bad things are good. This is about recognizing that between any event and your response to it, there's a space. And in that space lives your power to choose how you want to interpret what's happening. Let's say you get rejected from a job you really wanted. One perspective is, this proves I'm not good enough. I'll never get the opportunities I want. The system is rigged against me. That perspective creates suffering, resentment, and helplessness. But you could choose a different perspective. This rejection is redirecting me towards something better. It's giving me information about what I need to improve. It's freeing me up to pursue opportunities that are more aligned with who I'm becoming. Same event, completely different reality. The Stoic trains themselves to automatically look for the empowering perspective in every situation, not because they're delusional, but because they understand that their perspective determines their experience, and they refuse to waste their life experiencing unnecessary pain. Here's how you start taking control of your perspective immediately. When something happens that triggers negative thinking, pause and ask yourself, what's another way to look at this? What could this experience be teaching me? How might this actually serve my growth? Force yourself to find at least 3 different perspectives on any challenging situation. This isn't about convincing yourself that everything is perfect. It's about recognizing that you always have a choice in how you frame your experience, and that choice is one of the most powerful tools you possess. Law number 5. What you resist persists. What you accept transforms. This law reveals why most people's attempts to eliminate negative thinking actually make it stronger. Every time you fight a thought, every time you resist an emotion, every time you try to force yourself to feel differently, you're actually feeding the very thing you're trying to eliminate. Think about it like this. If I tell you right now, don't think about a pink elephant, what immediately pops into your mind? The pink elephant. The act of resistance requires you to focus on exactly what you're trying to avoid. The same principle applies to your negative thinking patterns. When you have an anxious thought and your immediate response is, I shouldn't be thinking this is stupid, I need to stop, you're not actually stopping the thought. You're engaging with it, fighting it, giving it more energy and attention. You're essentially having a conversation with the thought, which keeps it active in your mind. The Stoics discovered something profound. The fastest way to dissolve negative thinking is not to fight it, but to accept its presence without being controlled by it. Acceptance doesn't mean agreement. Acceptance doesn't mean giving up. Acceptance means acknowledging what's actually happening without adding resistance to it. Seneca wrote, "What is grief but an opinion?" He wasn't saying that loss doesn't hurt. He was pointing out that much of our suffering comes from our opinions about our pain, our resistance to feeling what we're feeling, our stories about why we shouldn't have to experience difficulty. When you stop resisting your negative thoughts, something magical happens. They lose their power over you. A thought that you're not fighting has nowhere to go. It arises, you notice it. You don't feed it with resistance, and it naturally fades away. But when you accept the presence of negative thinking, you also create space for transformation. You can observe the thought pattern objectively. You can see where it comes from, what triggers it, what it's trying to protect you from. And from that place of acceptance, you can begin to work with it skillfully, instead of being at war with it. Here's the practice. The next time you notice negative thinking arising, instead of immediately trying to shut it down, try saying, I notice I'm having anxious thoughts right now, and that's okay. I don't have to fight this. I can just let it be here without letting it control my actions. This isn't passive resignation. This is active acceptance. You're choosing not to waste your energy in futile resistance, and instead directing that energy toward responding wisely to whatever is actually happening. Law number 6. Your attention is your most valuable resource. Guard it fiercely. In a world designed to steal your attention, the Stoics understood something that's more relevant today than ever. Where you place your attention determines the quality of your life. And negative thinking is essentially misplaced attention. Attention that's been captured by thoughts that don't serve your well-being. Every moment you spend ruminating about past mistakes is attention stolen from the present moment. Every moment you spend worrying about future scenarios that may never happen is attention diverted from what you can actually influence right now. Every moment you spend comparing yourself to others is attention wasted on things completely outside your control. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself to focus his attention only on what was within his power to influence. He wrote, "Confine yourself to the present, not because the past and future don't matter, but because the present moment is the only place where you actually have any power. Think about your attention like a spotlight. Whatever you shine that spotlight on becomes your reality. If you're constantly shining it on everything that's wrong, everything you're afraid of, everything that might go badly, then that becomes your lived experience. But you have the power to redirect that spotlight at any moment. The practice of guarding your attention is simple, but not easy. Throughout the day, ask yourself, where is my attention right now? Is this thought pattern serving me? Is this worry actually productive? Am I focusing on something I can influence or something outside my control? When you catch your attention being pulled toward negative thinking, you don't fight the thoughts. You simply redirect your attention, like gently steering a car back onto the road when it starts to drift. You can redirect it to your breath, to your immediate surroundings, to a task that needs your focus, to a person you care about. This isn't about forcing positivity. This is about being intentional with where you invest your mental energy. The Stoics understood that your attention is finite, and every moment you spend focused on things that drain you is a moment not spent on things that could nourish you. The most successful people in any field, the most resilient people in any crisis, they all share this trait. They've learned to guard their attention fiercely, to focus on what matters, and to refuse to let their mental energy be hijacked by every negative thought that passes through their mind. Your attention shapes your reality more than your circumstances do. Master your attention, and you master your experience of life itself. Law number 7. Your mind is not your master. You are the master of your mind. This final law is the most challenging because it requires you to completely flip the relationship you have with your own thinking. Most people live as servants to their minds, constantly reacting to whatever thoughts appear, believing they have no choice but to follow wherever their mental chatter leads them. But here's the truth that will set you free. Your mind is a tool, not your identity. It's meant to serve you, not control you. Just like you wouldn't let a hammer tell you what to build, you don't have to let your thoughts dictate how you feel or what you do. Epictetus, despite being born into slavery, understood this principle better than most free men of his time. He said, "No one can hurt you without your permission." Think about the radical nature of that statement. Even as a slave, he recognized that his inner world, his mental responses, his emotional reactions, those belonged to him alone. Your mind produces thousands of thoughts every day, some helpful, some completely random, some designed to protect you from dangers that don't exist, some rooted in ancient survival programming that's completely outdated for modern life. But just because a thought appears in your mind doesn't mean you have to believe it, follow it, or let it determine your mood. Here's where most people get trapped. They think their thoughts are facts. When their mind says, "You're going to fail at this," they accept it as truth. When their mind says, "Everyone thinks you're weird," they treat it like reliable information. When their mind says, "Nothing ever works out for you," they nod in agreement and adjust their behavior accordingly. But the Stoic asks a different question. Instead of, "Is this thought true?" they ask, "Is this thought useful? Does believing this thought help me live according to my values? Does following this mental pattern move me toward the person I want to become?" Sometimes your mind will produce thoughts that are technically accurate, but completely unhelpful. Yes, you might fail at something new you're trying. Yes, some people might not understand you. Yes, life contains uncertainty and risk. But focusing obsessively on these possibilities doesn't protect you from them. It just prevents you from living fully. The practice of mental mastery begins with recognizing that you can observe your thoughts without obeying them. You can notice your mind telling you that you're not capable of something without letting that thought stop you from trying. You can hear your internal voice saying that disaster is coming without letting that voice control your actions. This is what the Stoics meant when they talked about living according to nature. Not the nature of your immediate emotional reactions or your habitual thought patterns, but the deeper nature of your rational, choosing self. The part of you that can step back, assess, and decide consciously, rather than just react automatically. Here's how you start reclaiming mastery over your mind. When a negative thought pattern begins, instead of getting swept away by it, pause and ask yourself, who's in charge here? Am I going to let this random mental event determine my next hour, my next day, my next decision? Then consciously choose what you want to focus on instead. This isn't about suppressing thoughts or pretending they don't exist. It's about recognizing that just because your mind produces a thought doesn't mean you have to rent its space in your head. You can acknowledge the thought, thank your mind for trying to protect you, and then choose to direct your mental energy towards something more constructive. The difference between people who are controlled by negative thinking and those who have mastered it isn't the absence of negative thoughts. Everyone has them. The difference is in who's driving the car. Are your thoughts taking you wherever they want to go, or are you consciously choosing the direction of your mental journey? Marcus Aurelius spent his mornings writing reminders to himself about this very principle. He knew that without conscious effort, his mind would default to worry, frustration, and negative speculation. So he deliberately programmed his thinking each day, choosing thoughts that would serve his highest values rather than his lowest fears. You have the same power. Every morning, you can set the mental tone for your day. Every moment, you can choose which thoughts deserve your attention and which ones you'll simply let pass by. Every challenge can become an opportunity to practice mental mastery instead of mental slavery. The Stoics understood that freedom isn't about your external circumstances. True freedom is the ability to choose your response to whatever life presents. And that freedom lives in the space between stimulus and response, in the moment where you decide whether to be ruled by your thoughts or to rule over them. But here's what makes this law truly brutal. Once you understand that you have this power, you can no longer blame your thoughts for your suffering. You can't say, "My mind made me feel this way," or "I couldn't help thinking those things." You have to take full responsibility for your mental landscape. This responsibility is both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it means you can no longer play the victim to your own thinking. liberating because it means you have far more control over your experience than you ever imagined. The ancient Stoics practiced daily exercises to strengthen this mental mastery. They would imagine losing everything they valued, not to torture themselves, but to prepare their minds to respond with wisdom rather than panic. They would deliberately place themselves in uncomfortable situations to practice choosing their response, rather than just reacting automatically. You can start building this same mental strength today. When your mind starts spiraling into negative scenarios, stop and ask, what would the wisest version of myself think about this situation? How would the person I'm becoming handle this challenge? What response would align with my deepest values rather than my surface fears? This isn't about becoming emotionless or disconnected from your feelings. It's about becoming the conscious director of your mental experience, rather than just a passive observer of whatever thoughts happen to show up. Every time you choose courage over comfort, wisdom over worry, presence over panic, you're exercising your mastery over your mind. Every time you redirect your attention from what's wrong to what's possible, from what you can't control to what you can influence, from fear-based thinking to value-based action, you're claiming your birthright as the master of your inner world. The Stoics knew that this mastery isn't achieved overnight. It's a daily practice, a lifetime commitment to choosing conscious response over automatic reaction. But they also knew that this practice is what separates those who are tossed around by life's storms from those who remain steady at their core, no matter what chaos surrounds them. Your mind will always produce thoughts. That's what minds do. But you get to choose which thoughts you engage with, which ones you believe, which ones you follow, and which ones you simply let drift by, like clouds in the sky of your consciousness. This is your power. This is your responsibility. This is your path to freedom from the tyranny of negative thinking, not by eliminating thoughts, but by mastering your relationship with them. Not by controlling what appears in your mind, but by controlling what you do with what appears. The question isn't whether you'll have negative thoughts. The question is whether those thoughts will have you. And that choice, that fundamental choice between mental slavery and mental mastery, that choice belongs entirely to you. Right now, as you absorb these 7 laws, something is shifting in how you understand your own mind. You're beginning to see that the prison you thought was locked from the outside has actually been unlocked from the inside all along. The key to your mental freedom isn't something you need to find or earn or wait for. It's something you already possess, something you've always possessed, something you simply need to remember how to use. These aren't just ancient principles gathering dust in philosophy books. These are living tools, practical weapons in the daily battle for your mental peace. Every morning when you wake up, every moment when negative thinking tries to take hold, every situation that challenges your inner stability, you now have a framework for responding with wisdom instead of just reacting with habit. The Stoics didn't develop these principles in comfortable meditation retreats or ivory tower academic settings. They forged them in the heat of real life, in the midst of wars and plagues and political upheaval and personal loss. They tested these ideas against the harshest realities human beings face, and they found them strong enough to provide not just survival, but dignity, peace, and even joy in the midst of suffering. But understanding these laws intellectually is not enough. Knowledge without application is just sophisticated ignorance. The Stoics were practitioners, not theorists. They lived these principles daily, tested them in the crucible of real experience, refined them through constant use. And that's exactly what you must do if you want to see real transformation in your mental landscape. Here's what most people don't realize about changing ingrained thought patterns. Your brain has spent years, maybe decades, carving deep neural pathways that automatically lead to negative thinking. These pathways are like rivers that have been flowing in the same direction for so long, they've created deep channels in the landscape of your mind. You can't just decide to think differently and expect those channels to disappear overnight. But here's the incredible truth the Stoics discovered through practice. Every time you consciously choose to apply one of these laws, every time you observe your thoughts instead of becoming them, every time you redirect your attention from what you can't control to what you can influence, you're carving new pathways. You're literally rewiring your brain at the neurological level. Modern neuroscience has confirmed what the Stoics knew through experience. The brain is plastic, changeable, constantly adapting based on how you use it. When you repeatedly practice these mental disciplines, you strengthen the neural networks associated with wisdom, emotional regulation, and conscious choice. When you stop feeding the old patterns of reactive thinking, those pathways begin to weaken and fade. This process isn't always comfortable. In fact, it can be downright brutal at times. Your mind will resist these changes because it's designed to conserve energy by running on autopilot. Breaking out of automatic negative thinking requires conscious effort, daily vigilance, and the willingness to feel awkward and uncertain as you learn new mental habits. Think of it like learning to play an instrument after years of never touching one. At first, your fingers don't know where to go. The sounds you make are clumsy and discordant. Your old habit of not playing feels so much easier than the struggle of learning something new. But with consistent practice, those awkward movements become fluid. The discordant sounds become music. What once required enormous effort becomes natural and effortless. The same transformation happens with your thinking patterns. Right now, negative thinking might feel automatic, natural, like it's just part of who you are. But that's not your true nature speaking. That's just habit masquerading as identity. Your true nature is the observer, the chooser, the one who can step back and decide how to respond, rather than just react. Here's where the rubber meets the road. You can't just passively absorb these 7 laws and expect them to work magic in your life. You have to actively apply them, moment by moment, choice by choice, thought by thought. This is war, and every negative thought that arises is a battle where you get to choose victory or defeat. When anxiety tries to hijack your attention with worst-case scenarios, that's your moment to practice law number 6. Guard your attention fiercely. Redirect it to what's actually happening right now, not what might happen in your imagination. When anger floods your system because someone didn't meet your expectations, that's your chance to apply law number 2. This emotion is information, not a command. What is your anger trying to tell you about your attachments, your need for control, your unexamined expectations? When depression whispers that nothing will ever change, that you're stuck in patterns that define you, that's the perfect opportunity to invoke law number 7. You are the master of your mind, not its victim. That voice of hopelessness is not your truth speaking. It's just another thought appearing in your awareness, and you get to choose whether to believe it or dismiss it. But here's the challenge that separates those who transform from those who stay stuck. This work is daily, moment by moment, sometimes exhausting. There's no graduation ceremony where you receive a diploma in mental mastery and never have to deal with negative thinking again. The Stoics understood that this is a lifelong practice, a daily discipline, a constant choosing of wisdom over habit. Marcus Aurelius was the most powerful man in the world, yet he still wrote daily reminders to himself about these principles. He still had to consciously redirect his thinking every morning. He still faced the same human temptations toward worry, frustration, and despair that you face. The difference wasn't that he eliminated these mental challenges. The difference was that he developed unshakable discipline in how he responded to them. Epictetus, despite achieving incredible wisdom and teaching these principles to others, still practiced them daily until his death. He understood that mastery isn't a destination you reach, it's a way of traveling through life. Every day brings new opportunities to choose conscious response over automatic reaction, wisdom over worry, presence over panic. This is both the burden and the beauty of human consciousness. You're never done growing, never finished learning, never beyond the need for daily practice. But that's not a limitation. That's your greatest gift. Every moment offers you a fresh chance to exercise your mental muscles, to strengthen your capacity for wisdom, to become more skilled at navigating the landscape of your own mind. The people who transform their relationship with negative thinking aren't those who have perfect circumstances or special genetic advantages. They're the ones who commit to daily practice, who treat every challenging thought as a training opportunity, who understand that mental strength is built the same way physical strength is built through consistent, intentional effort over time. Right now, as these words sink into your consciousness, you're at a crossroads. You can treat this information like entertainment, something interesting to think about but not necessarily act upon. You can file these laws away as nice concepts that might be useful someday when you have more time, more energy, more motivation, or you can recognize this moment for what it really is. This is your invitation to step into a completely different relationship with your own mind. This is your chance to stop being a victim of your thoughts and start being their master. This is the beginning of your journey from mental slavery to mental freedom. The choice you, in this moment, will determine whether these make right now 7 laws become transformative tools in your life, or just more information you consume and forget. The Stoics believed that the moment you truly understand a principle, you're responsible for living it. Knowledge creates responsibility, and responsibility demands action. Your negative thinking patterns didn't develop overnight, and they won't disappear overnight. But they will begin to lose their power over you the moment you start applying these laws consistently. Every time you observe a thought instead of becoming it, you weaken the old pattern. Every time you accept an emotion as information rather than identity, you build emotional intelligence. Every time you redirect your attention from what you can't control to what you can influence, you strengthen your capacity for peace. The transformation doesn't happen all at once in some dramatic moment of enlightenment. It happens gradually, almost imperceptibly, as you make thousands of small choices to respond with wisdom rather than react from habit. One day you'll realize that the thoughts that used to torment you for hours now pass through your mind like brief clouds across a clear sky. One day you'll notice that situations that used to throw you into emotional chaos now barely disturb your inner equilibrium, ionless or deity. This isn't about becoming emotashed from life. The Stoics were deeply engaged with the world around them, deeply caring about their families and communities, deeply committed to making a positive difference. But they learned to engage from a place of strength rather than weakness, from wisdom rather than reactivity, from choice rather than compulsion. They discovered that when you master your inner world, your impact on the outer world becomes exponentially more powerful. When you're not constantly battling your own thoughts, you have tremendous energy available for creating, loving, serving, building something meaningful. When you're not at the mercy of every emotional wave, you can respond to life's challenges with clarity and purpose. The 7 laws you've learned today aren't just about eliminating negative thinking. They're about reclaiming your birthright as a conscious human being. They're about stepping into the full power of your capacity for wisdom, resilience, and inner peace. They're about becoming someone who can face any storm and remain unshaken at their core. But the laws themselves are just the beginning. The real work starts now, in the laboratory of your daily life, in the countless moments when you'll choose between old patterns and new possibilities. The Stoics understood that philosophy without practice is worthless, that wisdom without application is just intellectual entertainment. Every negative thought that arises from this moment forward is an opportunity to practice. Every challenging emotion is a chance to apply what you've learned. Every difficult situation is training for the mental mastery that will serve you for the rest of your life. The ancient Stoics faced plagues, wars, exile, imprisonment, and death with dignity because they had trained their minds daily to respond with wisdom rather than react from fear. You face different challenges in the modern world, but the same principles apply. The same mental disciplines that served Marcus Aurelius in leading an empire will serve you in leading your own life. The same practices that gave Epictetus freedom even in slavery will give you freedom even in the midst of whatever constraints you currently face. This is your moment to begin, not tomorrow when you feel more motivated, not next week when your schedule clears up, not when your circumstances improve or your stress decreases. Right now, in this moment, with whatever thoughts are moving through your mind, you can begin practicing these laws. The Stoics would tell you that the perfect moment to start never comes. There's only this moment, and your choice to use it wisely or waste it in hesitation. They would remind you that you already have everything you need to begin this transformation. You don't need special equipment or perfect conditions or anyone's permission. You just need the willingness to observe your thoughts instead of being them, to accept your emotions as information rather than commands, to focus your attention on what you can control rather than what you can't. Your mind is waiting for you to claim your rightful place as its master. Your thoughts are ready to serve you rather than enslave you. Your inner world is prepared to become a sanctuary of peace rather than a battlefield of chaos. The only question remaining is whether you're ready to do the work required to make this transformation real. The 7 laws are now yours. The ancient wisdom is at your disposal. The path to mental freedom is clear before you. What happens next depends entirely on the choices you make, starting right now, in this very moment, with the very next thought that enters your awareness. The moment has come to face the hardest truth of all. Everything I've shared with you, every law, every principle, every insight about mastering negative thinking, it all means absolutely nothing if you don't take the next step. And that next step isn't some grand gesture or life-changing decision. It's much simpler and much harder than that. The next step is refusing to let this moment pass without action. Right now, your brain is doing what brains do. It's already starting to file this information away, already beginning to treat these laws like interesting concepts rather than life-changing tools. Your mind is whispering, "This was helpful. I'll remember this. I'll apply it when I need it." But the Stoics knew something your mind doesn't want you to realize. The moment you postpone practice is the moment you choose to remain exactly where you are. Seneca wrote something that should terrify anyone serious about change. Nothing, to my way of thinking, is a better proof of a well-ordered mind than a man's ability to stop just where he is and pass some time in his own company. But most people can't even sit with their own thoughts for 5 minutes without reaching for a distraction, without scrolling, without doing anything to avoid the uncomfortable reality of their inner world. Here's your first real test. When this video ends, when my voice stops filling your ears, when you're left alone with whatever thoughts arise, what will you do? Will you immediately jump to the next video, the next distraction, the next way to avoid being present with your own mind? Or will you sit in the silence and practice what you've just learned? Because here's the brutal reality most people refuse to accept. The quality of your life is determined not by what you know, but by what you consistently do with what you know. You can memorize every Stoic quote, understand every principle, nod along with every insight, but if you don't translate that understanding into daily practice, you'll remain trapped in the same mental patterns that brought you here. The Stoics had a word for this gap between knowledge and practice: akrasia. It's the human tendency to know what's right and still choose what's wrong. It's understanding exactly what you need to do to transform your thinking, and then doing everything except that. It's the voice in your head that says, "I'll start tomorrow. I'll be more disciplined next week. I'll really commit when things calm down." But things never calm down. Tomorrow never comes. Next week brings its own challenges. The perfect moment to begin this work is a myth your mind creates to avoid the discomfort of change. Marcus Aurelius understood this when he wrote his daily reminders to himself. He didn't write them once and assume he'd remember forever. He practiced the same principles every single morning because he knew that without daily reinforcement, even the wisest insights fade into mere intellectual curiosities. Think about the last self-help book you read, the last motivational video that fired you up, the last moment when you felt genuinely inspired to change. Where did that inspiration go? What happened to all those good intentions? They dissolved in the acid of daily routine, washed away by the current of habitual thinking, buried under the weight of choosing comfort over growth. This is why most people stay stuck, not because they don't know what to do, but because they don't do what they know. They collect wisdom like souvenirs, impressive to display but never actually used. They become experts at consuming information about transformation without ever experiencing transformation itself. But you're different. You have to be different. Because you've made it this far, because something inside you recognized the truth in these 7 laws, because despite every excuse your mind is generating right now, you're still here, still listening, still hoping that this time will be different. And this time can be different, but only if you make a decision that most people are unwilling to make. The decision to start imperfectly rather than wait for perfect conditions. The decision to practice daily rather than occasionally. The decision to treat your mental development like your physical survival depends on it, because in many ways, it does. Here's what I want you to understand about the path ahead. It's not going to be linear. There will be days when you apply these laws with precision and feel genuinely proud of your progress. There will be other days when you forget everything you've learned and fall back into old patterns of reactive thinking. Both experiences are part of the journey. The Stoics didn't expect perfection from themselves or anyone else. They expected progress. They understood that mastery is not about never failing. It's about failing better, recovering faster, and learning more deeply from each setback. Every time you catch yourself being swept away by negative thinking, every moment you remember to observe rather than become your thoughts, every instance where you choose wisdom over worry, you're building the mental muscle that will serve you for life. But here's where most people get derailed. They expect dramatic results immediately. They want to apply these principles for a week and experience a complete transformation of their mental landscape. When that doesn't happen, they assume the principles don't work and abandon the practice entirely. This is like going to the gym once and expecting to see visible muscle definition, or practicing piano for a few days and expecting to play like a virtuoso. Mental strength, like physical strength or musical skill, develops gradually through consistent practice over time. The changes are often so subtle that you don't notice them happening until you look back and realize how different your responses have become. The person you'll be 6 months from now, if you commit to daily practice of these laws, will handle stress differently than you do today. They'll respond to criticism with more equanimity. They'll face uncertainty with greater calm. They'll experience negative emotions without being controlled by them. But that future version of yourself can only exist if you make the choice to practice today and tomorrow and the day after that, and every day until these principles become so integrated into your being that you no longer think about applying them, you simply live them. This is what the Stoics meant when they talked about virtue as a way of life rather than a set of rules. These 7 laws aren't meant to be consulted occasionally when you're feeling overwhelmed. They're meant to become the operating system of your mind, the default patterns that activate automatically when challenges arise. But integration takes time. It takes patience with yourself when you forget. It takes compassion when you fall back into old patterns. It takes the humility to recognize that this work is never finished, that even the wisest among us continue to practice these principles daily until their final breath. Epictetus spent decades teaching these concepts, yet he never stopped learning from his own experience of applying them. He understood that teaching and practicing were inseparable, that true wisdom comes not from perfect understanding, but from imperfect but persistent application. So let me ask you directly, are you ready to stop being a consumer of wisdom and start being a practitioner of it? Are you willing to trade the comfortable familiarity of your current mental patterns for the uncertain territory of growth? Are you prepared to do the daily work that transformation requires, even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it? Because that's what separates those who change from those who stay the same. Those who change do the work when they don't want to. They practice when they're tired. They apply principles when it's inconvenient. They choose growth when comfort would be easier. The Stoics called this discipline the cardinal virtue, not because it was pleasant, but because it was necessary. Without discipline, all the wisdom in the world becomes nothing more than entertainment. Without daily practice, the most profound insights remain forever theoretical. Your mind right now is probably generating reasons why you can't commit to this level of practice. You're too busy. You have too many responsibilities. You'll start when your current stress decreases. You need to research more before you begin. These aren't reasons. They're excuses dressed up as logic. The truth is, you'll never have enough time until you make time. You'll never feel ready until you start before you're ready. You'll never have perfect conditions until you learn to practice in imperfect ones. The Stoics didn't wait for ideal circumstances to begin their philosophical practice. They began in the midst of chaos and found their center through consistent application of these principles. Marcus Aurelius was fighting wars, dealing with plagues, managing an empire, and facing personal loss when he wrote his most profound insights. He didn't postpone his practice until his external world became peaceful. He used his practice to find peace within the storm. Seneca was navigating political intrigue, managing vast wealth, and eventually facing his own execution when he developed his deepest understanding of these principles. He didn't wait for a quiet retirement to begin his philosophical work. He used his circumstances, however challenging, as the raw material for wisdom. Epictetus was physically disabled, had experienced slavery, and faced daily discrimination when he mastered these teachings. He didn't use his disadvantages as excuses to avoid the work. He transformed his limitations into the foundation of his strength. What's your excuse compared to what these men faced? What challenge in your life is so overwhelming that it prevents you from spending 10 minutes a day observing your thoughts? What responsibility is so demanding that you can't redirect your attention from worry to presence? What circumstance is so difficult that you can't practice accepting what you cannot change while focusing on what you can control? The answer is none. There is no external condition that prevents you from beginning this practice. There are only internal resistances, mental habits that prefer the familiar pain of negative thinking to the unfamiliar effort of mental discipline. But here's what will happen if you choose the path of resistance, if you decide that these principles are interesting, but not worth the daily effort required to implement them. 6 months from now, you'll face the same mental challenges you're facing today. You'll experience the same anxiety, the same depression, the same overwhelming flood of negative thoughts. You'll still be looking for solutions outside yourself, while the tools for transformation sit unused in your memory. A year from now, you'll watch another video like this one, read another book about mental mastery, attend another seminar about positive thinking. You'll feel that familiar spark of hope, that momentary belief that this time will be different. But it won't be different unless you make it different through daily, consistent action. The Stoics understood something that modern culture has forgotten. Inspiration without perspiration is just entertainment. Knowledge without application is just intellectual hoarding. Understanding without practice is just sophisticated procrastination. You don't need more information. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need ideal circumstances. You need to start. Right now. Today. This moment. With whatever thoughts are moving through your mind, whatever emotions you're experiencing, whatever challenges you're facing. The 7 laws are your tools. Your daily life is your workshop. Every negative thought is raw material waiting to be transformed through skillful practice. Every challenging emotion is an opportunity to build emotional intelligence. Every difficult situation is training for the mental resilience you're developing. But the work doesn't do itself. The laws don't apply themselves. The transformation doesn't happen automatically. It requires your conscious choice repeated daily to prioritize inner growth over outer comfort, long-term development over short-term pleasure, wisdom over habit. This is your moment of decision. Not tomorrow's moment, not next week's moment, but this moment, right now, as these words reach your consciousness. Will you close this video and return to the same mental patterns that brought you here? Or will you use this ending as your beginning, this conclusion as your commencement, this final word as your first step into a completely different relationship with your own mind? The ancient Stoics are waiting for your answer. Not in some mystical sense, but in the very practical sense that their wisdom lives or dies based on whether you choose to embody it. Their insights become real only when you make them real through daily practice. Their teachings transform lives only when someone decides to let those teachings transform their life. That someone could be you. That transformation could begin right now. That different life, that mental freedom, that unshakable inner peace you've been seeking. It's not some distant destination requiring years of preparation. It's available to you the moment you decide to stop thinking about change and start practicing it. The choice is yours. The moment is now. The tools are in your hands. What happens next is entirely up to you. But remember this. The Stoics believed that we're not just responsible for our own mental development. We're responsible for demonstrating to others what's possible when someone commits to this path. Your transformation becomes a beacon for others who are still trapped in negative thinking. Your peace becomes proof that inner freedom is achievable. Your example becomes the invitation others need to begin their own journey. You're not just changing your own mind, you're changing what's possible in the world. One thought at a time, one choice at a time, one day at a time, starting right now. The moment you commit to this path, something extraordinary begins to happen. Not in some magical, mystical way, but in the most practical sense imaginable. You start to notice patterns you've never seen before. You begin to catch your mind in the act of creating suffering where none needs to exist. You develop what the Stoics called the discipline of perception, the ability to see reality clearly without the distortions of fear, anger, or despair. But let me tell you what nobody else will tell you about this journey. It's going to expose every excuse you've ever made about why your life is the way it is. When you start applying these laws consistently, you'll realize how much of your suffering has been self-created, how many of your limitations have been self-imposed, how much of your pain has been optional all along. This realization can be devastating. There's a moment when every person serious about mental mastery faces the same brutal truth. All those years blaming circumstances, other people, bad luck, unfair treatment. They were just elaborate ways of avoiding the responsibility that comes with real power, the power to choose your response regardless of what life throws at you. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this moment of awakening when he realized that he had been his own worst enemy for most of his life. Not because he was a bad person, but because he had been unconscious of his own mental habits. He had been letting his mind run wild, creating elaborate stories about why he should be upset, why he should worry, why he should feel frustrated with the people around him. When you start practicing these 7 laws, you'll face the same reckoning. You'll see how much energy you've wasted on mental activities that serve no purpose, except to make you miserable. You'll recognize how often you've chosen the familiar comfort of victimhood over the unfamiliar territory of personal responsibility. This isn't comfortable. In fact, it's often more difficult than the original suffering, because now you can't blame anyone else for your experience. You can't point to external circumstances and say they're forcing you to think negatively. You have to accept that your mental state is your creation, which means it's also your responsibility to change it. But here's what makes this responsibility beautiful instead of burdensome. The moment you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, you discover just how much you actually can control. When you stop wasting energy fighting reality, you have tremendous power available for shaping your response to reality. When you quit arguing with what is, you can focus entirely on creating what could be. The Stoics discovered that this shift in focus is what separates those who thrive from those who merely survive. Thrivers don't have better circumstances, they have better mental habits. They don't face fewer challenges, they respond to challenges more skillfully. They don't experience less pain, They create less suffering around the pain they do experience. Think about the most resilient person you know personally. Not some famous figure or historical character, but someone in your actual life who seems to handle stress with unusual grace. I guarantee you'll notice something specific about how they think. They don't spend time dwelling on things they can't change. They don't create elaborate stories about why life is unfair. They don't waste energy trying to control other people's opinions or actions. Instead, they focus their attention and effort on what's actually within their influence. They respond to setbacks with curiosity instead of catastrophe. They treat obstacles as information rather than evidence of cosmic injustice. They've learned, either consciously or unconsciously, to live according to these ancient principles. But here's what's crucial to understand about developing this kind of resilience. It's not a personality trait you're born with or without. It's not some special gift that only certain people possess. It's a skill set that anyone can develop through deliberate practice. The Stoics proved this by taking ordinary people, often people who had faced extraordinary hardships, and teaching them to find peace in the midst of chaos. Epictetus himself was living proof of this principle. Born into slavery, physically disabled, with no social status or material advantages, he could have easily justified a lifetime of bitterness and resentment. Instead, he used his circumstances as raw material for developing unshakable inner strength. He became so skilled at mental mastery that wealthy Romans would travel hundreds of miles just to learn from him. His story demolishes every excuse about why these principles can't work in your situation. If a disabled slave in ancient Rome could master his mind completely enough to become one of history's greatest teachers of human psychology, what's preventing you from applying the same principles to whatever challenges you're facing? The answer isn't your circumstances. The answer is your willingness to do the daily work that transformation requires. And that work isn't complicated, but it is consistent. It's the choice to observe your thoughts instead of being consumed by them. It's the decision to treat your emotions as information rather than commands. It's the commitment to focus on what you can control rather than what you can't. Every single day presents you with dozens of opportunities to practice these skills. Every negative thought that arises is a chance to remember that you are not that thought. You are the observer of that thought. Every challenging emotion is an opportunity to get curious about what it's trying to tell you, instead of being overwhelmed by it. Every frustrating situation is training for your ability to separate what you can influence from what you cannot. But most people miss these opportunities because they're not paying attention. They're on mental autopilot, reacting to life instead of responding to it. They've never learned to create space between stimulus and response, so they get pulled into every emotional drama their mind creates. The Stoics called this unconscious living, and they saw it as the root of human suffering. Not the external events themselves, but our unconscious reactions to those events. The good news is that consciousness can be developed. Awareness can be trained. The space between stimulus and response can be expanded through practice. Here's how you start expanding that space immediately. The next time you notice yourself getting pulled into negative thinking, stop and take 3 deep breaths. Not because breathing is magic, but because it forces you to pause. In that pause, you can remember who you really are. You're not the anxious thoughts. You're not the angry feelings. You're not the depressive stories. You're the consciousness that's aware of all these mental events. From that place of awareness, you have choices. You can engage with the thoughts or let them pass. You can investigate the emotions or simply feel them without being controlled by them. You can respond to the situation from wisdom or react from habit. That choice, that fundamental choice between conscious response and unconscious reaction, is where your freedom lives. These 7 laws aren't just concepts to understand. They're weapons to wield in the daily battle for your mental freedom. Every morning you wake up is another chance to choose mastery over slavery, wisdom over worry, presence over panic. The ancient Stoics handed you the keys to your own prison, but only you can turn the lock. Your thoughts will keep coming. Your emotions will keep arising. Life will keep throwing challenges at you. But now you know the truth that changes everything. You are not your thoughts. You are their master. Stop waiting for the perfect moment to begin. Your transformation starts with the very next thought that enters your mind. Choose wisely.